So we are live here for a Psych for Sore Minds, doing something that I don't usually do, which is a live stream with a friend of the channel and a friend of mine, Andrew Gold. How are you doing, Andrew?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Dr. Sohom.
It's an absolute pleasure. Is there a counter of how many people are on this? Oh, there it is up there, 9. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so welcome everybody, the 9 of you that are watching. We will be asking Andrew about what I think's a very interesting and controversial interview that he's had recently on his channel. It brought my attention, and I just thought there was a bit of psychological exploration in exactly what happened. So, do you want to tell us what your... Well, actually, first of all, do you mind starting by telling us who Lloyd Evans is?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me on. Good to be here on this lovely channel. I've been on here before, haven't I? And it's the first time we're both getting into YouTube. It's quite a funny thing because I guess we in quite an is it pretentious way? We come from these non-YouTubey backgrounds. Of course, you're a forensic psychiatrist and I am an investigative journalist, and we're getting into this YouTube world and we're getting into these lives and things, and it's really good fun to do. So Lloyd Evans, he was a Jehovah's Witness. So I do a lot of videos talking to people who have left cults, and I look into like the cultish mind and the ideologies that we can all fall for. And it doesn't have to be religion and stuff like that. It can also be extreme politics, and so like people who have gone far right, people who have gone far left, that kind of thing. So I'm fascinated by that kind of thing. Lloyd Evans, he became a huge name in the Ex Jehovah's Witness game or business, as I don't think he'd like to call it, but you know, this is YouTube, and he was making a lot of money. It was mad, actually. I used to go and look at his live streams sometimes, and I didn't even know, being quite a novice with YouTube, I didn't know that you could even like give money to people while they're talking. And he would get, just from talking for an hour about the Jehovah's Witness Church, the JW Watchtower they would call it, upwards of like $3,000, I think, or at least in the thousands. It was insane amounts, lots of money, and that's nothing wrong with that. So he left the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, or the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, became a big name himself as the ex-JWs, as they're known, and created a huge community around that. So that is just a brief, I go into a lot more, but that's just to give you a brief idea of who Lloyd Evans is.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So now that we know who he is, how did you get into contact? How did you guys get into contact, and what brought about the interview that you did?
So I first spoke to him over a year ago, just as another episode. You know, there's one episode a week, nothing unusual about it. It was just, you know, I'd found him online somewhere and just, okay, here's an episode about what it's like to grow up in the JW or Jehovah's Witness Church. I was really, really interested in, like, you know, they do a lot of door stepping. You know, they go from door to door. You may have had them come to your house yourself. Do you want to, you know the truth, that kind of thing. And it was just a really interesting thing. He told me about how, you know, his family would prepare him for the apocalypse when he was younger, and all kinds of things that we might even equate with some level of abuse, particularly around sexual repression, which is a common theme I find with all the cult leavers I speak to, whether it be Mormons or Scientologists, or there's always seems to be this sort of sexual repression, Hasidic Jews, extreme Islam, sexual repression is going on. Now, that does become quite important later on in Lloyd's story.
So, I'm just going to interrupt you just for a sec, Andrew. I just want to say, for all these kind people who are joining in the conversation, I imagine that a reasonable proportion of you are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. So if that's the case, please let us know. And also the things that Andrew's talking about, so the sexual repression, is that something that sounds familiar to you? And what were your experiences? Let us know, and we'll shout you out. Sorry, continue, Andrew.
No, that's a great point. It's always great to hear from people. The last few days, I should say, my page has been inundated with some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. There were already a high proportion of ex-JWs on my channel just from having interviewed Lloyd the previous year and being into all the cultish stuff, the cultish language, because I think a lot of these people left these cults. They want to fully understand what the thing they were in is and how it works. To be honest, a lot of them have a better understanding than I do. They experienced it themselves. But I think the people like us, we can offer, you know, me from a journalistic perspective, you from a psychiatric perspective, we can offer different views, just outside of views, which add to make a composite of the whole cult aspect, the whole cult thing. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a normal interview, really, and we got on very well. And he was a big YouTube, and I was just dipping my toe into YouTube at that time because my podcast is audio. Normally, it's on Spotify and Apple, and that's where I earn my living. I earn a living doing that and have been doing for a few years. And I brought it onto YouTube just at the point when I first interviewed Lloyd. And so I had a Patreon and all that set up. And Lloyd encouraged me. He was very nice and supportive with me. And he started contributing to my Patreon. You know, he was getting quite a lot on his own Patreon. That's, by the way, for those who don't know, it's a membership where you offer, maybe a YouTuber offers extra bonus stuff or ads-free material, and you pay a few pounds or dollars a month typically for various different bonuses and things. So he was very supportive, very nice, and we kept in touch a little bit. You know, we'd see each other on Twitter, that kind of thing. He was getting in a couple of arguments with other friends of mine about things that I thought were a little bit ideological. He seemed to be very far left and quite woke is what we'd call it, very progressive and that kind of thing, which is fine. Now, should I go into the recent controversy?
Yes, please do. Please tell us what happened with the interview and why it all started to go sour.
Okay, so this was now like a year and a half later, and I suddenly saw that a lot of the ex-JWs on my channel, they would mention Lloyd in the comments and stuff, so I went to Twitter to see what was going on. And what emerged was Lloyd... Oh, and an important part of this is that a lot of what Lloyd talks about on his channel is about exposing the Jehovah's Witness Church for sex trafficking and sort of that kind of thing, taking advantage of people sexually. Lloyd confessed unsolicitedly, I want to say, but without being asked, to his producers on his show that he had been seeing sex workers. Now, Lloyd's married with children. Now, the first thing I thought of is, well, it's none of our business because you can do what you want. I mean, people do things that are supposed to be immoral. Personally, I don't trust people who seem to be moral all the time, who don't ever transgress our societal laws or whatever. I think there's something a bit odd about people who just toe the line. So if anything, it made me think like, okay, bit dodgy, but none of my business. Until I saw more and more about it and people were saying, well, you know, okay, sex workers is one thing, but a lot of this was allegedly in Thailand, where it's known that a lot of people are trafficked to go there. There's a lot of the very thing that Lloyd talks about. And when you combine that with the fact, as a lot of ex-JWs were telling me, that they were giving to his Patreon, they were giving him thousands in his live streams, they're paying him to do his advocacy work so that he, and then he goes and does the very thing that he's preaching against. Anyway, so Lloyd gets in touch.
Before we get into that, if you don't mind, just to clarify, sure. What was he, when you say that he's exposed the Jehovah's Witness movement for sex trafficking, what specifically is he alleging? Like, is it what it seems like, that they actually were involved in it? So they actively would get people and make them work as sex workers? No.
So I don't know that much about it, but what I know is that the JW, we need people in the comments to help with this, but from what I can gather, the church makes a point. It's like the policy, almost like company policy, is not to report any sexual abuse that goes on in there. What happens within the church stays within the church. So I don't think it's that, some sort of cult where we're going to raise people to be child whatevers. I'm going to skirt around particular words that might get your YouTube channel demonetized or whatever. But it was very clear that you were not to report anything that goes on in there. And then I think obviously Lloyd was reporting for 10 years, so a lot of it might have been about all sorts of things. And to be honest, I didn't look that deeply into it. So again, people in the you've got people saying.
Our good friend Ash has helped by explaining that it's not sex trafficking. It's just that they were not reporting the abuse.
Yeah, I've had it said to me that Lloyd talked about sex trafficking. The thing is, it's very hard to research. I do typically research a lot, but he's done like 1 million videos over 10 years. So it's very hard to know. But he does touch on sex trafficking from what I've heard. But the main thing in the JW stuff was hiding child sex abuse, as Fade to X says in the comments there.
And it sounds like you're saying that he was getting money from his seemingly altruistic work to try and challenge this and tackle this, but it's a bit dodgy. There's some suspicions about what he was using the money for. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, that's what it is. And I should just say, Tom Shepherd in the comments saying it's a 2-witness rule. They need 2 Jehovah's Witnesses to witness something before taking any action. So it's sort of a, when are there ever going to be 2 people watching? It's very unlikely unless we're talking about grooming and that kind of, these gangs. So it was basically a way of saying we will never report this stuff. And Lloyd did some fantastic work exposing a lot of it, and he was very angry about it, quite rightly, because he was brought up in it. But then, to do what he did, it's just very, very complicated. And I'm in 2 minds about it as well, because you do have, you have to think about the private and the public. Lloyd made himself into a very public figure, whether he wanted to or not. And with that comes a level of responsibility, particularly when you're dealing with the kinds of people who were following him, who were very vulnerable. They were people who just came out of something that was the very cult that Lloyd is talking against. And it meant that there was some sort of, and a lot of XJWs have told me this, like a lot of them are saying, some of them had a break between leaving Jehovah's Witnesses and then finding Lloyd, and they find it all a lot easier to deal with. Some people went straight from the Jehovah's Witnesses into sort of the Lloyd Evans channel, and in some senses, and everybody disagrees to what extent, it feels like they just replicated the same cult dynamic with another sort of flamboyant leader, in this case Lloyd Evans.
So can you give us a couple of examples, please, of what you know about Andrew, of the way that the behaviour is similar from the Jehovah's Witness to coming into his camp?
Sure. I mean, so here's the thing. I recently did a course for YouTube, and so what I'm going to say about Lloyd, it's not dissimilar to a lot of YouTubers. It's something we all have to do to an extent. And it's the same in business. It's the same and there are levels of cult. So I'm not suggesting that Lloyd Evans is like, Jim Jones of the Jonestown massacre, the cult suicides and things like that. It's nothing like that. But there are certain echoes, and to become a top YouTube leader, that you're often told you need to do things like rituals and certain things that you say every time. And Lloyd would pick up on sayings of the church, and then he would subvert them and use them as his own sayings. So one I picked up on, for example, just from having a little look through some of his videos, was he has a social media editor or something called Tibor, and he would say, if Tibor is gracious, and it would mean like if Tibor is willing to, he'll put a picture above me now. Like if Tibor is gracious. This is speaking in sort of pious words and language, it's cultish language. I had a guest on my podcast called Amanda Montell, who's fantastic, talking about the language of cults, the way that it's all about language. I mean, language is manipulation in a sense, and it depends how you use it. So that kind of thing is important. Then there are rituals, the way he says hello every time. Again, a lot of YouTubers do this. Icons, for example, that yellow light behind me, that could be considered one, for example. The blue, you've got that wheel, right? But you're sometimes doing your videos in different locations at the moment. Yeah. But someone sees that wheel, someone sees you've got a teddy bear on, don't you, on the bed? Is that right, or somewhere?
I've seen usually have some sort of cuddly toy in the background, or dinosaur.
Yeah, which is fantastic. It's my favourite part. It's the only part of your show I like. But those kinds of things all add together to make up a cult leader. But the main thing that holds it together, to be a bit culty, is creating what they call non-believers. So it's creating another side and us against them. Now, obviously, Lloyd being, an ex-JW, his whole point was about the non-believers to his channel, who ironically are the believers, they're Jehovah's Witnesses. But it's creating an enemy. And whether he meant to or not, over the years, he became, and his show came to depend on sort of the madness of and the continuance of the Jehovah's Witnesses. If they suddenly packed up and went away, he'd have nothing left. And that, so again, it's not necessarily his fault, but he finds himself in a situation that becomes increasingly open to becoming toxic. And I use the Arsenal Fan TV as a good example of this as well. Anyone who's into soccer or football, the Arsenal is a team, and they have a fan club on YouTube who do extremely well. They get like millions of views, and I've interviewed them as well. And because the most pressing point with them is, and what they get a lot of criticism for, is that when the team do badly and they lose like 4-0 against Liverpool, those are the best performing videos. The worse the team does, the better the videos perform. There's a similar symbiotic symbiotic relationship with Lloyd and his and the Jehovah's Witnesses. The more crazy, awful things they do, the more views he gets. And that's quite common to YouTube. But it does create a toxic environment for people who have left Jehovah's Witnesses and end up in what you might call the cult of Lloyd Evans.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. So I've watched bits of the interview that you did with him, and it seemed to be fairly pleasant throughout. Certainly it started off that way. So can you explain how things started to go down south?
Yeah, it all went a bit sour. Here's the thing, like, I mean, you'll know this. When you have people on who you interview on your channel, it's very, very difficult to confront them. And there are a few reasons for that. So my background in journalism, so typically I would make documentaries for the BBC or HBO or whoever it was. And what would happen is the TV channel or whoever else, the production company, would organise for me to speak with some person who might have unsavoury views. For example, an abusive exorcist who's taking advantage of young women in his church or something like that. I've never met the exorcist. I've never, I may not have had dealings with that person. And then I turn up and I'm there to interrogate them. Now, what happens when it's your own channel on YouTube or an audio podcast or something is that you talk and you become friends. And Lloyd, of course, had been putting money into my Patreon account. It was only £1.50 a month, but it was like 18 months that he was doing that. And it was just a nice supportive thing. Yeah. So to then be like, hey, mate, and I said to him, I can see that this is really awful, what's happening with you. And he said he'd like to come on my show and clear the air. And as you say, it was okay, the chat. I did try and push him and say, like, look, the problem here was that he wouldn't apologise, apart from to his wife. He wouldn't admit any wrongdoing, any problem with the fact that he was doing the very thing that a lot of people saw he was preaching against. And regardless of his opinion on it, so many people in his community were hurt by it, and he just refused to sort of take their thoughts on board.
So could I just ask, are you saying that he was apologising to his wife because obviously that meant that he was having extramarital affairs, but he didn't see anything ethically wrong with using sex workers or prostitutes? Is that how he came across?
Yeah. Which is, again, in fact, I think he sees it, and from how he's spoken before on his channel and from what other ex-JWs have been telling me, he sees it understandably as like a progressive thing in a sense. That he had like a sex worker on before, for example, and a lot of on his show, and a lot of people were commenting saying, hey, this isn't right given that a lot of us were abused and this kind of thing. It's quite triggering for you to be putting a sex worker on. And I think it's understandable because there's different points of view, and I'm really open to plurality of opinion and thought, and that's what my show is about. And I think that's a valid argument that he has, which is like, hey, look, sex workers, they can do, they're valid people as well, and it's valid work, and some of them take pride in their work. But the key thing here is some of them, and many who don't take pride in that work. Many are trafficked, many are taken advantage of.
So the crux of the matter, as I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, and please in the comment section throw in your opinions, is that it's a balance, isn't it? Because on the one hand, what he was doing is related to his personal life, and if he wants to look for vices by using sex workers, then that's kind of his personal business, generally speaking. But you could argue that in this case it's different because he's actually campaigning against, well, he's not campaigning against prostitution per se, but he's campaigning against the Jehovah's Witnesses at least cover-up of sexual abuse that's occurred. Is that basically what it's about?
Yeah. He's campaigning against vulnerable young people being taken advantage of and being, put into sexual relationships and that kind of thing, that being abused basically. And I think given that, I think he had a responsibility not to do what he was doing. And I agree with you, what he did to his family. Look, and also we will say, like, look, private matter, none of our business. But it's bad, man. I mean, it is quite bad to just leave your kids and family and stuff and go off on like a holiday to Thailand. And he was on my video with him. I didn't even notice at the time. He admitted he was dating a sex worker. So at that point, we're talking about a married man with kids saying that he was off dating a sex worker, and you're thinking, I don't think he quite understands the blurred lines of consent when you're dating a sex worker. That's not to say that sex workers can't, outside of their work, be dating people, but that doesn't seem to be what was really happening, because Lloyd went away on a holiday. He wasn't like off there for, living there, as far as I know. So it is a bit, none of my business, you might say. It's a bit bad, But the main thing, as you say, is I guess he let down his community. He did something that was quite hypocritical given what he said, but he refused to admit to any of it. He refused to take responsibility for any of it.
And what do you think that's about? Do you think that's because he genuinely doesn't think that anything he's done is wrong, or do you think he's too embarrassed, or do you think he might have apologized in different circumstances but felt that you were pressurizing him, or a combination of those things? What do you think it was about?
It's really hard, and I did push him about the fact, that a lot of people say never apologise. And when you do apologise to a baying mob, it's never enough. So I do get that. There was that recent thing with the comedian Kevin Hart, who had made homophobic comments like 10 years ago, and he apologised at the time. It was a joke he made, but it was offensive, and he apologised. And 10 years later, he was asked to speak at the Oscars, and somebody sort of found those old tweets and they resurfaced, and the Oscars asked him to apologise, and he was like, I've already apologised. I'm not apologising a second time. Because at what point is it enough? And we all know that that can be a sort of a toxic behaviour in itself. If you've got a relationship, if you've got a wife or a husband or whatever it might be, and they do something a bit wrong, and you want more apology and more apology. And at what point do you say, like, hey, this is about me desperately wanting some sort of power over this person? Yeah. So I do have sympathy for him not wanting to apologise. That said, this went on for months and months, and people were clearly really hurt. This wasn't making a point and wanting to have power over him in the most part. They were hurt by it, and they wanted an apology. So I think part of it's that, and I think part of it is, you tell me. I mean, you watched the interview. What are your thoughts about? We never know, do we, what someone really thinks. So is it a case of he didn't feel sorry, didn't think he did anything wrong, and he was standing by it, or he knew he was wrong but didn't want to apologise?
I think, from what I saw, he was a bit blindsided by the whole thing. So I think that he expected it to be like a unchallenging, fairly sort of pleasant, neutral conversation. And I think you even said this on your other video that you put in your channel, that it was a bit awkward for you and a bit of a moral dilemma, because I think you used the words, you're not Lloyd's PR person, right? So he asked to come on your channel, and so if he's asking to come on your channel knowing that you're an investigative journalist and knowing what you're about, which is, challenging beliefs in an open way, then he's got to expect that not every question is going to be like a PR opportunity for him. So I think he reacted. You could see him being his sort of mind ticking, and I think he was a bit blindsided, although did, at least on the surface, seem to handle it quite well. He didn't seem to get particularly flustered. But it appears that, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, it was afterwards that he became more threatening. Is that right?
Well, so this was the thing. We spoke, and he was happy with it. He was afterwards. He said he thought I was fair. He understood, and I had a niggling feeling afterwards that I was like, oh, I didn't go in as hard as I should have done, but.
So what would that have looked like if you did go in harder? What would you have said?
I think I could have gotten a little more flustered and it's something I struggle to do. And it's for those very reasons I spoke of before with the podcast. It's a case of, I've invited this person on. I'm sitting there. What people don't see when you are interviewing someone, they don't see the bits before, all the messages. Hey, mate, how you doing? You want to come on my podcast? They don't see the bit that we just had before, for example, where I'm going like, yeah, is your headphones all right? How's your camera, mate? Is it all right? Do you mind sending me the audio after? Because it's clearer on your, all that kind of thing. And then I'm supposed to go, mate, you were out of order. That wasn't right what you did. And your people, and that's what, people in the UK will know the reference, but Jeremy Paxman or someone, he was able to do that for years. Certain journalists do that. They do these pieces on, say, celebrities that just tear them apart. And I've always felt that's not really me. I find it very, very difficult to do. But that's what it would have looked like. It would have looked like me going, Lloyd, come on, mate. Like, okay, it's not just you've said sorry to your family, but the ex-JWs want some sort of recognition that you did something that flies in the face of what you're expected to do. You're human, you make mistakes, and you get past it. But by not apologising at all, I think that was very difficult. So that's what that would have looked like, yeah.
I suppose there's a slight irony in that he probably wanted to look like he was standing his ground, and that's why he didn't apologise. But actually, it's become more of an issue now than it would have been had he just said a quick sorry. So, have you heard directly from ex-JWs expressing their discontent at what he's done? So this is not just your message, is it? It's also from what that community is saying. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. And again, this is the difficulty of being a journalist. You're right in the middle and you want to be impartial and you don't know who to listen to because everybody has different ideas about what's going on. But what changed everything with this was, as you say, like after the video, we spoke. We were speaking on right. So what I do is I release the audio version of the podcast in the morning. So I did that Monday morning or Thursday morning it was, and then later in the evening at 9 p.m. I put it out live. So I'm in the chat on the side, and people are watching the video for the first time on YouTube. And I expected people to come in, and some people to be defending him, and some to be against him, and that's what Lloyd sort of imagined as well. I also understand that those who are discontented or whatever are the loudest. The angry voices are going to be the loudest. So I knew there'd be a bit more being angry at him, but I thought there'd be some angry defenders as well, and it would be a whole war. That's not what I found at all. What happened was every single commenter, every chat person, or unless I mean apart from one or two, but hundreds of them were against Lloyd, and they weren't even talking about the sex worker situation. They were saying he's been bullying me for years. He blocked me when I suggested something. He was incredibly rude to me. He's threatened to sue me. I think there were 12 people he's threatened to sue. And again, it's the hypocrisy thing, because he put out so many videos having a go at the Jehovah's Witness community and the Watchtower that it's called, because they were what he calls litigious. But then he goes out and starts, threatening to sue people who shut him down. So that's another example of how he was acting like the cult that he was part of before.
And when you say bullying people, what format has that taken? Is that only on social media, or have you heard from people where he's like actually bullied them in real life or overpowered?
No, I've not. There's no real life stuff. I mean, he lives out in Croatia, so he's quite far away from the whole thing. I don't know about any like real life bullying, but.
Well, I might just quickly ask people in the comments if anybody knows, just to enlighten us, if there are any specific examples that you know of the allegations against Lloyd. It'd be very helpful. Sorry, I interrupted you, Andrew. Carry on.
No, you're right. It's a good point to ask, actually. So yeah, it's online, and it's a case where people would message like, "Hi, Lloyd, this thing that you said, like, I'm not sure that's right," and he would block them immediately or shut them down. Some people talked about what they call doxing, which is when he would take somebody's information and put them out, like on Twitter. I mean, having not been in the XJW community, this wasn't stuff I saw. It was all going on sort of in the background. The only time I saw some of it was when it was related to a friend of mine called Stephen Knight, he's got the Godless Spell Checker podcast. Yeah, so Stephen's great, and he's like funny, very centrist. He's in the center of each issue, and he sort of makes fun of the extremes a little bit. And he suggested at one point that Lloyd had become religious, I think in another sense, like that he was woke, or after leaving one religion, he's joined another, so to speak. And Lloyd got so upset with him that he reported him to Ricky Gervais, because Stephen Knight's a close friend of Ricky Gervais. Well, not close friend, but they've worked together before and they're sort of friends. And so Lloyd was like, I wonder what Ricky Gervais... And it was this one time that I'd seen like, oh, okay, this is a bit... we're all creators here. We're all content makers. And I think, like, Sohom, if you said something on Twitter that I didn't agree with, either I'd just leave it like, oh, I don't agree with that, but he's like a mate of mine. Whatever happens, I'm not going to start going like, to someone else and saying, have you seen what Sohom's writing? Unless it's very extreme, do you know what I mean?
Also, Ricky Gervais never returns my calls, so you probably wouldn't have much success.
Stop returning mine as well. I did try and get him on my show, actually, and I got through from to one person to another of his like agent people, and I was getting along the line, and then one said, sorry, he doesn't have the time, which was very sad.
I think he does have the time. So can you tell us a little bit about threatening to sue you? So how did that come about, and what's that about, and is it still an issue now?
Right. So what happened was, as more people were in the chat, I should just say, in the YouTube video, as we're showing this interview between me and Lloyd, and everybody's telling me, he bullied me, he doxed me, he did this and that. You need to speak to the producer who made the allegations in the first place, who's called Kim, and Kim was his like producer on YouTube and stuff. And he told her for some reason about all this stuff, and she sort of got it out there. And everybody's saying, you call yourself a journalist, why don't you speak to Kim? And I said, I can't, it's just going to turn into a circus. This is going to be, and it's embarrassing, and it's too much, and it's going to be piling on to him and all that stuff. But I found myself running out of excuses as to why I wasn't interviewing her as well as a professional journalist. I'm not a YouTuber. I like to see myself with the the pretense I have as a journalist. So while it's all going on, the video is premiering on YouTube. I messaged Lloyd and said on Twitter, and I just said to him, "Listen, mate, I think I've got to interview Kim straight after this to hear her side. I'm really sorry, mate." And I think a normal way to respond to that, like if someone had said that to me, would be like, "Look, I'd really rather you didn't. I'm feeling so low at the moment. Can't we take a break and like consider this later? Because I'm a bit, and all that." But that wasn't what happened. He came back quite aggressively and made accusations of me being a tabloid sensationalist journalist, which is a sore point for most journalists. It was a sore point for me. And I did used to work at The Sun, so he has a point, really. But that was my first job. I was at The Sun. But it's just I couldn't find a job anywhere else. But it's basically, that's having a go straight at your integrity. But it also made me see how he was sort of emotionally pulling the strings. And it was exactly what I'd heard from people in the XJW community about how he'd spoken to them. It was very manipulative. It was saying like, "Oh, you want to speak and see the other side, do you? Well, that makes you, a bad journalist. That makes you essentially a bad person." So we had this back and forth, and I'm going, "Mate, I really think I have to do it." And the closer he could see, the more that I was going to interview her and get to the truth of the whole thing, the more desperate he got. And he said, "Listen, if you do this, I'm going to have to withdraw my Patreon. I hope you realise that, And I'm like, "Mate, it's £1.50 a month. Like, what a weird thing to say." And what kind of journalist would I be if I was like, "Okay, I won't search for the truth, then I won't pursue the truth because I could really do with this £1.50 a month. At least offer like a few grand or something if you want to buy my integrity." So
how much does your integrity cost?
I would say it depends, because I don't think I'd take a bribe in terms of money. I'm not that motivated by money because as long as I'm okay, I don't need luxuries and stuff. I would take, if somebody were able to say, "Look, I'll give you 1 million YouTube subscribers so then you can earn from YouTube forever and do what you," I think I'd be like, "Oh, maybe I'd lose my integrity then if you're going to give me 1 million." But no, I am half joking. No, I'm joking, but like £1.50 certainly wasn't going to do it. So I'm like, okay. And the problem was psychologically for me at this point, I'm like, well, I have to do it now. I've just been basically bribed not to do it. And as a journalist, I have to do it now. And then as his final sort of clutching at straws, he says to me, if you do this, Kim's going to be lying to you, and she will lie. She's a psychopathic liar or something like that. She's something like that. And I'm going to have to add you to my list of litigation. And at that point, I just blocked him because I'm just not going to hear that. And that's a red flag to a bull with journalists. Any journalist worth their salt, if somebody you're doing a story on says, "Don't speak to that person or I will sue you and take money away from you," you're like, right, I 100% have to do this interview now. So I did it with Kim, the producer. She basically talks about a lot of what we've just spoken about. And it went wild because a lot of people were waiting for somebody from outside the community to expose a lot of this stuff for a long time. So it was like a real rush of endorphins, and it's been nice. And my concern now is talking too much about it, for too long. And I sort of after today might want to draw a line under it,
Yeah. To be fair to you, in conversations we've had today, you were a little bit tired of speaking about it all, but I'm one that's kind of tempted you out just because I think it's really interesting.
You gossiper.
So I wanted to get your take. Yeah. You know what I was thinking when you're describing him. I know this is a cliche to say, but he does sound like quite a Bond or typical narcissist to me. So.
Oh yes, tell me. I want to hear. I want to hear the psychiatric review from afar.
Yeah. So obviously, I've not got the privilege of interviewing him or assessing him in person, but from the little that I know from what you're saying. People just think that narcissism is about wanting to be the center of attention and wanting to look good in everybody's eyes and about stoking your ego. But it's a bit more than that. So a true narcissist is very, very prickly and oversensitive. So the very fact that he is so litigious, that he's got a list of litigation, I think that's the one biggest clue out of everything you've said, the one that stands out the most to me. The very fact that there's so many, like, if he hears an opposing view and he automatically strikes out and wants it to be crushed, as opposed to arguing about it sensibly, that screams narcissism. It's also one of the character traits of internet trolls, quite typically, that they just don't want to hear any nuance or any balance. They just want to cut down anything that disagrees with them. So on the surface, he seems like a true narcissist to me.
Did you pick up anything just from watching him, like mannerisms and things like that, or is that a bit lay person?
I mean, I personally don't think that you can make any kind of accurate diagnosis by looking at somebody's body language. There are many people that have tried to make careers out of that and would disagree with me about that. But my counter to that would be that if you look at formal diagnoses or court reports or expert witness stuff that I do, I've never seen anybody ever that's a body language expert that's had any evidence that's been given a level of credibility. So it might be credible on YouTube, but it's not credible in real life. But you can still tell how somebody, or at least take an educated guess at how somebody's reacting to a situation by the way they present on YouTube. And I think he came across as quite level-headed and quite calm, actually, which is probably quite telling, because he's obviously seething with anger underneath, but he didn't really lose his shit to you, did he, when he was speaking to you?
No, but I didn't push that hard.
Yeah.
He did lose his shit once I offline sent a few messages.
Yeah. But so I suppose he's not really that reactive. So he's not what I would call like a sociopath or somebody with antisocial personality disorder. It seems to be different. It's more sort of narcissism. Yeah.
But wasn't there impression management? Let's say, and I don't think he is a sociopath, but let's say it were a sociopath. Presumably they would be, just no matter how angry they are in their minds, they would be presenting this really calm front.
Yeah, so that's more of a psychopath than a sociopath. So even though there's a big overlap between the two, generally speaking, sociopaths tend to be a lot more reactive. So they are not able to keep their cool and wait for the right time to get revenge compared to narcissists. Narcissists are a lot more calculated. Compared to psychopaths. Psychopaths are a lot more calculated, and they can fit into society a lot more effectively. Whereas a sociopath would probably lash out with anger more easily.
I think one of the things that I found interesting, and the thing that turned the whole thing on its head was the victimhood stuff. And another thing he said was like, so you're just going to interview my bullies? And it's like, I know Kim, I've met her only because I've been interviewing her with regards to this whole topic. But like the idea of her as like this big bully was just mad to me, just having spoken to her a few times, and they worked together fine over the years. She can't be such a big bully. But it was always that, it's a bully, and now you're going to be a bully, and now this and that sort of victimhood stuff. It's very, there's something very unattractive about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've got some comments from our mutual friend Eric Hunley, who has stated that body language is not something that's admitted in court, same as a polygraph test, which is very true. I think there's a misconception that you can just do a lie detector test and it's accurate. If that was the case, you wouldn't need a judicial system or a judge or a jury, would you? Just do that for every case. Whereas they can pick up changes in physiology, like increased heart rate or dilation of the pupils, etc., etc. That only picks up a physical reaction. That doesn't necessarily mean somebody's lying. So if you're on a murder charge being accused of killing somebody, you could be innocent, but you could be so agitated or anxious at the time that your observations, your blood pressure, your pulse, etc. changes. So that's what's picked up in a polygraph test, not the truth.
Yeah. I was talking to Eric Hunley on his show last night, actually, and I was saying that, and it just happened now as well. As soon as you said the word blood pressure, I suddenly got like an adrenaline jolt, because I suddenly imagined myself being asked these questions, and I go, oh, like that. I think I would be extremely sensitive, and so much so that maybe a polygraph might be a waste on me.
Really? I think the opposite. I think I'm too crafty. You wouldn't be able to catch me out.
Yeah, you really are. I see there's nothing behind those eyes, Sean.
Which is why I've never been charged with murder.
You've never been caught.
So Eric's just asked, isn't it true that all psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths? Yeah, pretty much. So everybody that is a psychopath everybody that's a psychopath has to have a degree of narcissism. I suppose the difference is a few things. First of all, that psychopaths have a lot more going for them. So they're all manipulative and charming, whereas narcissists are not necessarily manipulative. They all think they're charming, but not all of them are charming. And I suppose another big difference is that a narcissist always wants to be the centre of attention, whereas a psychopath, even though they love themselves, they're cunning enough to know when not to be the centre of attention. So they know when to rein it in. They know when they're getting, when people around them are starting to dislike them, or when the tide is turning, and they're very good at changing their behaviour to adapt to that. Does that make sense? So a narcissist would not be clever enough to realise when people are disliking them or thinking they're too much up themselves, whereas a psychopath might have those wants and desires, but they're clever enough to manipulate the situation.
Sounds like your regular YouTuber, and I mean that I was making that point before. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, to be obviously aside from us, but when you look at, like, because we're great and everyone else isn't, but like the big YouTubers and stuff, and if you want to be able to, do you see similarities in sort of the kinds of personality traits that a cult leader might have to have?
And YouTubers.
Well, to become a successful
Yeah.
YouTuber or to become the head of a community.
Yeah, I mean, I think to become a successful YouTuber, especially in the climate nowadays when there's so much competition, you certainly have to have a few specific personality traits. You have to be extremely driven. You have to be very good at dealing with rejection. Do you have to be manipulative? I don't think you have to be. I think it helps in certain fields. So if you're in a field where it is really good to gain attention and to diss other people, then people who are narcissists and people who are psychopaths will definitely thrive in that field. So they will be full of them enough and have the confidence and the ego to want to push their own agenda, and they'll be willing to stab other people in the back or trample other people to try and get their viewing numbers up. But not all YouTubers are like that. So some, like for example, there's kids who are multi-millionaires for unboxing presents on channels, and makeup artists and that kind of people. I don't think you need those traits to have your niche in that particular area. So that's a waffling way to answer your question. Is I think it depends on the type of YouTube personality. There's definitely some where being narcissistic or being psychopathic will absolutely help, but not the nicer end of YouTube.
Yeah, Godless Scummer saying that's why my channel has so few subs. Me too. That's what I think. Fate X, how do you feel about making money out of activism? Is it a necessary evil? What do you think?
I think that's for you.
That is the symbiotic relationship I was describing, and it's really, really difficult. If you start making money out of activism, you sort of end up in a point when you're relying on the very thing that you are activating against continuing. Right? If your entire money is made from criticizing what Jehovah's Witnesses are doing, and then suddenly the Jehovah's Witnesses don't exist anymore, which is presumably your goal, right? That the church stops being a church. Well, you also stop having a job, and I can see how that can happen. You don't mean it to happen, and over the years, it does happen. And you do see some of these people. I've seen a few people who are activists or whatever. They start being activists on YouTube, and then they very quickly start to branch out and cover different topics because I think they become aware this isn't going to end well if I keep up with that activism. At the same time, as Dr. Sohom knows as well as I do, the amount of time you have to put into YouTube, and the few people who have been criticizing me from the Lloyd camp, and I welcome their opinions because it is all food for thought. I don't have the final say on this, and I'm still trying to work out how I feel. So it's really interesting to hear what people are saying. But they start criticizing this sort of ad hominem attack that I've seen done to lots of YouTubers, and it's like, you're interested in views and subscribers, and it's like, well, I mean, that's literally the job. Like, imagine me going to somebody who's an accountant and like you only care about the numbers and figures, and it's like, that's your job. So this is our job, and look, we wouldn't have gone into it if we weren't passionate about it. I'm really passionate about like looking into cults and activism and stuff like that. Dr. Sohom's really passionate about psychiatry and that boring stuff. Just kidding. But if we just wanted views and whatever, clicks, we'd be doing cat videos. So we're obviously, there is the passion and the interest, but don't forget that this is our job. Like, we do other bits as well. We do other things, but this is like a lot of time. And people come back and they say, you've changed the picture on the thumbnail. What's that about? Like, as if I'm trying to be manipulative. And it's like, well, I'm seeing if it works better and gets more clicks because it's the job. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So I've got a few things to say about that. So firstly, about activism, I suppose it depends on what that person's real goal is, because some people will just do something because they're passionate about it, passionate about that particular area, and that's their only agenda. But to do it effectively, they might have to dedicate their life to it. And as you say, we need to make a living. You can't, you rely on people's goodwill and on donations and, YouTube streams to do that. But I suppose it's a fine line between doing that to be able to pay for your lifestyle so that you have more time freed up to follow your cause is one aspect, but that's very different to people who, as you say, realize that there's money to be made and change their agenda. So I think it's a fine line. I'd like to think that most people do it for the right reasons, but I absolutely think that there are some people who just jump on the bandwagon. And about the YouTube thing, absolutely. So just speaking briefly from my experiences, when I first started making videos, they were very information heavy, and I go into lots of medico-legal details and break down diagnoses and blah, 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 because that's what I know the most about. And I have learnt over time to change that, to make it much more sharper, snappier, go into less detailed information, because I'm just not going to get the attention. And that's not me sort of changing my moralistic beliefs or the core of what I'm about. It's just recognizing that there are things that are going to work and things that aren't. And on a platform like YouTube, where anybody can make a video with just a mobile phone, you have to be savvy enough to make sure that what you're doing gets enough clicks and gets an attention. So it's a balance between doing that without losing your integrity. But I suppose I'm just seconding what you're saying. It's not easy. It's very, very competitive. So you have to do that. And if you didn't do that to a degree, then you're wasting your time, basically.
Yeah, there are plenty of things I think that you and I, if we were thinking in purist terms, exactly what we'd like to do, if we could live that way and live from it on YouTube, the amount of time and hours it takes. I mean, like you say, you would be doing different things. You'd be doing it maybe longer and going into more detail and that kind of thing. I would probably be, right now, I would be making the documentaries I used to make for the BBC. I'd be like going investigating like weird and strange people and, you know, with real life, and get a camera team and stuff like that. But the amount of money and time that I'd have to spend, and then there's no guarantee that even as many people who would watch as they do now, maybe just 10 people watch. And that feeling when you put it out online and it's like, oh yeah, no one's watching this one. What a waste my last few hours or weeks were. So we do have to, you know, bear that in mind sometimes. And but that is also why I wouldn't want activism to be my thing on YouTube, especially because I've been worried for ages about the difference between YouTube and between journalism and activism. And I think there's a real blurred line at the moment. And there's a lot of people perhaps posing as journalists who really are activists, and they're not trying to see the center of the story. They're not trying to get both sides. And I find that quite frustrating sometimes. Yeah. Got a question from Sandra here. Shall I answer that one?
Yeah, go for it. Read it out,
just about what motivated Lloyd to tell his producer in the first place. And I think that's a really interesting question. I'll just say that I'm writing a book about secret keeping at the moment. And I'm fascinated by, you know, what we call the fever model, which is when you're carrying a secret, your body starts to, or your mind starts to act a little bit like it would do with a fever, in the way that the body becomes uninhabitable for a virus when it's a physical fever. When it's secrets, it becomes uninhabitable in the mind to keep those secrets. That's the theory anyway about secrets. So we're all desperate to get them out, and there are certain types of people we tell. There are also theories that by telling people, you sort of make them an accomplice, which is a bit more of a negative spin on, and that might be why he told the producer. But I asked him myself, and he didn't seem to know. What are your thoughts on why people reveal secrets?
So I saw the footage of when you asked him, and you're right, he seemed very confused, didn't he? And I think he must massively regret it, because it kind of changed the trajectory of where he was going. What are my thoughts on why people tell secrets? I'm not really sure, to be honest. I got a couple of secrets myself, and I don't feel compelled for either of those reasons to tell anybody. Like, I don't.
What kind of secrets do you have?
I'm not telling you, obviously.
No, just what sort? What sort? Is it, because the most common ones, I'm trying to remember what they all are, like from your lover, from often about abortion, that's one of them, drugs, just nod, love.
Just keep my head still.
He nodded. Oh God, yeah. No, it's well. You probably, but you're a psychopath, Dr. Sohom, so that's different. So you don't feel the fever model, but I mean, it makes sense from you look at like things like game theory, and you look at like the way we evolved with tribes and things, and it makes sense for the tribe as a whole, for the individuals within it to want to get their secrets out, because a tribe where everybody just keeps their own secrets is not going to be as successful. And that's the interesting thing about it, because obviously for the individual, they are better off if they're able to live happily keeping big secret. So that individual is better, but the tribe is not. And if the tribe does badly, the individuals do badly. So it's a really interesting dynamic between, and so obviously what's happened over the years, the tribes that were most successful were the ones where people felt they had to reveal certain things, and things weren't kept from the tribe. And again, going back to that culty or communal aspect of the whole Lloyd Evans saga, it's really interesting to look at. Again, he felt he had to tell someone from his tribe, either just to feel better. It could be just to get some reassurance. Oh, come on, it wasn't that bad what you did. Or it could be to make those people an accomplice. I've heard that's a popular tactic in prisons and stuff. You tell someone something and now suddenly they're in on it as well. And they feel the same burden of keeping the secret that you do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you're the one writing the book, so I defer to your expertise, but that will make sense to me.
As long as you literally are the expert, so I defer to your expertise.
Before we wrap up, any other final questions for anybody in the comments section?
How's this? While we go on. Go on. What you're saying?
Joe's asking me about psychopathy and head injury. I'll give you the short answer, Joe. So I don't think head injuries lead to somebody being a psychopath, but they can certainly lead to what we call frontal lobe syndrome. So your frontal lobes are the lobes at the front of your brain. They control a number of things such as speech and language, some elements of memory, but they also control your inhibition or disinhibition. So somebody who has very specific injuries in that area can become quite aggressive and can act in a very disinhibited manner. Same kind of thing as you'd act if you're drunk, so not looking through or thinking through the consequences of your actions. Occasionally leads to violence as well. That's my 1 minute answer.
God, I love it. I love hearing you talk, man. It's lovely.
Oh, shucks. Stop it, Mr. Gold. Stop flirting with me. Okay, any last questions for anybody?
While we're waiting for them, I'll just say I've very much enjoyed this. It's been nice. We should do this kind of thing more often, shouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you tell my viewers about your podcast and what's going on?
Oh, get out of here. Well, I suppose I should mention it a bit more. I'm going to talk about Louis Theroux in a second. Yes. Yeah, On the Edge with Andrew Gold. It was primarily an audio podcast. I made it because I was finding it more and more difficult to make documentaries for the BBC. They wouldn't let me do some of the more extreme ideas, so I have people on there like that you could never really have on mainstream TV. A couple of times I interviewed, child sex offenders. I won't say what we call them, but the P word. Celebrity people as well, like David Baddiel or Amanda Knox, just to get inside their heads, find out what's going on. And a lot of it is to do with this kind of cultish ideological thinking on both sides of the spectrum. And I often get in trouble for that because the people who are a little bit more right-wing who follow me get upset when I have a go at that, or I put someone on who got too right-wing or something. And the people who are very left-wing aren't happy when I have a go at something like the woke culture and stuff like that. So it's all about, we try to stay centered, but it's all about the ideologies and the extremes and stuff. And I should say that my channel right now is on 4,987 subscribers. So I'm hoping by the end of this, if you guys come and subscribe, I might hit 5,000, and I can celebrate and do a big Q&A about it next week. So if I get enough subscribers from this now, I'll be very excited and do a Q&A. So yeah, lots of similar stuff to Sohom, and also Dr. Sohom is on the podcast. And I should add, it's on YouTube now as well. It's not just on audio, so it's all the videos and stuff.
And I would strongly encourage, if not insist, for my viewers to go and check out your podcast and subscribe.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, did you want to answer that question on Louis Theroux? And then let's wrap up after that.
Sure. Where was it? I can't find it.
It is living here. It says, have you ever analysed Louis Theroux?
Yes, I have analysed him, and I've spoken with him because he watched my exorcism film on the BBC where I was exposing an exorcist, because I was trying to be very similar to him. I obviously grew up watching him and I really enjoy his work. And I was speaking to his production company for a while about ideas together, because he's going off screen and things haven't quite happened. But I have watched him, and one of the best things that I've seen him do, I've analysed lots of little clips of him, but there are times where, what was it? In Louis and the Nazis, there's this time where he's trying to get information from someone, and he does this amazing thing psychologically. He asks this guy, like, were you involved in some sort of prison thing, right? And the guy doesn't want to say. So, and they're at his house, the guy's house. The guy's like, I'm not talking about that. And they go out into the garden of the guy's house. They're looking around and they walk around the pool. The guy's like, let me show you the views. There's like some views of some cliffs and stuff like that. And Louis doesn't push further trying to find out the answer from this guy. He just walks, and then for some reason, this is a really strange thing to do, he walks in front of the guy who is showing him his house. And you can find this on Netflix, or maybe it's iPlayer, but Louis and the Nazis halfway through somewhere. He starts sort of dawdling, just walking a bit in front of this guy and just acting really uninterested. And the guy then is sort of racing to catch up with Louis, even though he's supposed to be showing him around his house. So I notice how the dynamic changes very quickly from the guy shutting up and being like, no, I'm not telling you this thing, I'm showing you my house now, to Louis now walking, and the guy's trying to follow him and try and impress him, and Louis looks really uninterested. And then they get to the end of the garden, they're looking at the views and stuff, and Louis, I think, finally can see the dynamics changed, and he asks again, just like, so what was this prison stuff? And the guy tells him everything.
Really?
And it was just an amazing little psychological trick that I learned watching Louis through, of just like, if you want to know stuff, don't let the person know that you want to know. They need to impress you with their stories. So that's it.
When you were saying that, that reminded me of negging. You know, have you heard of The Game? Is it called The Game with Neil Strauss? So for anybody watching this who doesn't know, there is a movement, I think it's fair to call that, of pickup artists, basically, who are average kind of looking guys who make it their business and their profession even to go around picking up women. And there's entire kind of language and theory and strategies they use behind this. And one of the main ones is negging. So if you have a target, so an attractive female that you want to get on your side, you pay them a bit of attention, but not quite enough. And you always leave them wanting more. So for example, if you approach a group and you want to chat up one particular target, you are polite to her, but you ignore her and you focus on everybody else around her, so she then wants your attention. Or you give her a compliment, which is both an insult at the same time, and that's called negging. Something like, those earrings look good on you, they don't usually suit somebody with such a round face, or something like that. So it's both an insult and a compliment. If you keep doing that, then they kind of try and seek your approval. And once they start on that path, apparently it continues and supposedly leads to sex. I'm not sure that I buy any of this, but it's still interesting psychologically, just as a theory. So that's what it sounds like Louis Theroux was doing. Yeah. I don't know if it was doing instinctively or intentionally, but it seems like...
I remember you telling me you were a big fan of that book, weren't you? You used it a lot over the years.
That's my secret.
Yeah, that was the secret. No, that's not true at all. The Louis thing's interesting because people always ask him, like, you know, are you playing a role? Are you doing this or that? And he says, I'm just sort of being myself. There's a really interesting thing. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but like with regards to self, there is a change when there's a camera on you. And I've noticed myself when I do documentaries and go to these places that are quite dangerous. I mean, I'm a coward. I would never go to these places. But as soon as a camera is like on me, it's like shining on my face, you're being yourself, but you're almost watching yourself from the outside, and you're sort of being entertained by the documentary and the film that's being made. So I think he is being himself, but he's also always going to be very aware of what he's doing, and he'll know, like, he's not answering me, I'm just going to sort of walk, and I think this might get the answer out of him.
Yeah, interesting. So he is much craftier than he might come across, Louis Theroux.
Yeah, it's like it's like crafty and not crafty. It's like natural and not natural. I don't imagine he's thinking too much about it. It's just it's sort of second nature to him. But I think if he were to be really honest and look inside, maybe he'd see there is a craft to it. And I'm sure he'd like to think there is a craft, right? He's made a whole career out of it, and it would be sad probably to look back on your oeuvre and think, I was just bumbling around and it just happened to work. There has to be some psychological craft behind it, you'd hope. And I don't think that's being manipulative at all. Yeah,
I agree. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Gold, for coming on and explaining what happened with Lloyd Evans. That's really interesting. It certainly cleared up a lot of my questions, and thank you so much for all our contributors with your comments and questions. Hope you enjoyed it. It's the first time I've tried to do a live stream, so I was kind of frightened that it would go wrong technologically, but as far as I can tell, this has all worked.
They've not heard us the whole time.
None of this is recorded. But stay in touch, Andrew, and we've got a couple of collaborations in the bank, haven't we, that will be coming up on both of our channels within the next few weeks, talking about some very serious serial killers, haven't we? Yeah, they're coming out on my audio podcast, and I'll put them out on the video, and they'll come out on yours as well, so people probably have to watch them twice, so we both get the views. We've collaborated before as well. It's always been really, really nice, and fast becoming best friends. So you have to tell me what those secrets are. It's a very, very incestual world of YouTube, isn't it? And I promise I won't tell anybody your secrets about killing those prostitutes, so it's all good. All right. Nice to meet you. Goodbye, everybody. Have a nice weekend. Bye, everyone. Hello, Holly Grant. Hello, bye, everyone.